me today to tell me how she did after one of her doses. It's a woman with multiple sclerosis that is now able to walk without dragging her leg. But at the same time that I was doing LDI with her, I also had started something called low-dose naltrexone. And it's possible low-dose naltrexone is, but I'm still working with LDI, but I'm advising people that it is not the big game changer, I think, for most people that Dr. Vincent was describing out of his practice, at least in my practice, where I likely take care of a different type of Lyme patient than Dr. Vincent takes care of, okay? So if you want to know more about LDI, take a look at the article. It's one of my free articles. You'll find it under the free reads tab on the navigation menu. But to let you know, Debbie, I'm using it. There are still some people getting benefits, but I find it's helping maybe about 40%. I have not been terribly thrilled with it, okay? All right, thank you for that question. All right. Hello, Jenny. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Is there a co-infection that strikes with panic and nausea 12 hours apart? 8 years now. Diagnosed by Eugenics 2010 on clindamycin only now for cellulitis. Been on most antibiotics, though. All right. So, Jenny, if your question is there a co-infection that gives you panic attacks and then 12 hours later is always followed by nausea? No, I would not say that I am aware of anyone that has those specific symptoms, okay? But in terms of a co-infection that can give panic attacks, one of those is Babesia. Babesia is known for giving panic attacks. And sometimes it gives nausea, but I've never seen it with a pattern of 12 hours apart, okay? Other symptoms that make me think about Babesia are panic attacks, as we already mentioned, having drenching night sweats, having a lot of temperature dysregulation where you're hot one moment, cold the next minute, having a lot of frontal headaches or migraine headaches can sometimes be part of Babesia. Air hunger, feeling like you can't get enough air in at times is part of Babesia as well. And then one of the more strange Babesia symptoms that people will get, they can have frequent deja vu experiences, like once a day, and sometimes even many more times than once a day, or maybe a few times a week, but they get a lot of deja vu experiences, okay? Sometimes Babesia can give a cough. Babesia is also known for giving a lot of racing and skipping of the heart, and sometimes fainting episodes too. So those would be things that make me think about Babesia. Now, as you know, if you Jenny, you've participated in webinars long enough. When we're using these symptoms to diagnose an illness, you don't have to have all of them, but if you have enough of them, that's suggestive of having one of these co-infections like Babesia, okay? So, and the other thing about Babesia, again, with testing, it's not great for Babesia. We estimate there's 15 to 20 strains, and when we look at the effectiveness of the testing, it's only good for maybe finding 1 or 2 strains. So I usually tend to base my treatments on my decision whether to treat for Babesia or not based on what the symptoms tell me. Okay? All right. Thanks for that question, Jenny. Hello, Patty. Let's see here. Hold on here a minute. Hi, Dr. Ross. It seems like I tested positive for Aspergillus, though, through real-time labs and on an organic acids test. Do you recommend to do an ERMI? I had the house inspected and mold air testing is fine. Aspergillus penicillicum mildly elevated was found on dust sample on one of the return vents. Okay. So Aspergillus, everyone, is a mold that you can find in wet buildings. An ERMI is a specific type of test to figure out if you have a lot of mold spores in your home. And so that's what the ERMI is, okay? And I'm not sure how that relates to your organic acid test, to be quite honest with you. The Aspergillus, in terms of real-time does a lab test where they will look to see if you are peeing out toxins that you can get from mold, and they can do a test to see if you're pulling out something called aflatoxin and ochratoxin, which are two kind of toxins that you can find with aspergillus. And I think that's why you're saying real time, is I suspect they're measuring that you're peeing out the actual toxins that you can find from aspergillus, okay? In terms of an ERMI, I think ERMI is a better test to figure out if your home environment where you live right now is producing enough mold toxins that you need to clean out your home environment. I find that's the best way to do that. It's not only going to look to see if you have aspergillus mold toxins, it's going to look for a number of other toxin producing fungi as well too. And I think it can be a very accurate test. So I would probably recommend doing that, okay? Keep in mind that you could have also had your aspergillus and toxin exposures outside of your home. All right, so it's possible you got this somewhere in the past, maybe another home you owned before, etc. Okay, all right. So Patty, I hope that gives you some ideas, and thank you for that question. Hello, Sherry. Let's see. Sherry, I'm not quite sure why you're not getting audio and video. I hope you're getting it now. I'll put it that way. All right, let me see here. Bear with me here a minute, everyone. I'm just looking to see if anyone else is expressing that as a problem. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Jan, for letting me know the audio is okay. I appreciate that. And Peter, too. Thank you, everyone who responded to say it's okay. So I'm not quite sure why you're having that problem up in Canada. I hope it was just a temporary problem, okay? All right. Hello, Susan. Let's see. I also have Lyme carditis, and I feel the doctors in Canada don't know much about it. Any suggestions? So carditis, everyone, means inflammation of the heart muscle, and usually it's going to be caused by infection. And the infection that would give a Lyme carditis most often is going to be Lyme, as opposed to Bartonella, as opposed to Babesia, the co-infections, okay? The way you treat Lyme carditis is actually kill Lyme. So I hope they have you on antibiotics. Now, if you have Lyme carditis, this is one of those situations where you want to do IV antibiotics versus doing oral antibiotics. It probably is a better, more effective way to get that Lyme heart inflammation under control. And I would use something called ceftriaxone, also known as Rocephin. And I would do it as 2 grams IV each day for about a week. And if that seems to be tolerated, then I would go up to doing 2 grams twice a day, but for 4 days on and then take 3 days off, okay? The other thing I would do while you're getting that ceftriaxone is I would probably couple it with something called Flagyl, also known as metronidazole, orally. You don't have to do that one IV. And because that will treat the cyst form of Lyme and will also treat intracellular Lyme, that while the ceftriaxone is treating the third form of Lyme called spirochete Lyme. Okay, so when you treat Lyme, you have to treat for all 3 forms of the germ. We believe there are 3 forms of the germ, or we know there are 3 forms of the germ. There's the spirochete, that's what looks like a corkscrew. There's a form of Lyme called the L form that lives inside of cells. We need to treat for that. And we also need to treat for a microscopic cyst form of the germ, okay? Now, there are many different antibiotics that will do that. I'm going to do a quick screen share here to give you some other ideas, or I'm going to show you where you can look later to get other ideas on how you treat all 3 forms of the germ. All right, so to find out, in terms of recommendations I have to treat Lyme infection, take a look at this in the chapters, look under infection treatment plans, and take a look at the article called A Lyme Disease Antibiotic Guide. All right, here. This happens to be one of the free articles as well, too. And in here, I talk about the fact you got to treat all 3 forms of the germ, okay? And down here in the middle, I give you a description of the antibiotics I routinely use and what forms of the Lyme germ they might treat. And then the third part of this antibiotic article is How do you put it together? And I give you 10 examples of different antibiotic regimens I might use that will treat all 3 forms of the Lyme germ, okay? One of those is my favorite herb combination made up of otoba bark and cat's claw. Otoba bark, many of you know of as a product by Nutrimetics called Banderol, and cat's claw is Cemento, which is another Nutrimetics product, okay? But take a look at this article later. Again, you'll find it under the free reads, but also is in the infection treatment plan chapter as well, too, okay? All right, and yeah, I think that takes care of that. Let me go back here. All right, good luck to you, Susan. Hello, Jessica. Let's see. Thanks for your awesome webinars. You're welcome. I'm in a state that doesn't believe in Lyme. I've had Lyme for maybe 25 years, treating myself now with Banderol and Cemento, and wonder how long I should continue to make sure Lyme is gone. Also taking Houtunia and Sida acuta for Bartonella. Same question on them. How long? Okay, so the thing about if you've had Lyme for a year or more, the Lyme infection, I'll talk about Bartonella in a minute. In terms of Lyme infection, I am of a school of thought, and many of my colleagues share the same opinion too, which is if you've had Lyme in you for a year or more, probably, even when we use antibiotics, whether it's prescriptions or herbs to kill the germ, we probably never eradicate all of the germs. We probably never get rid of all of them. Rather, what we're doing is we're knocking them down to a level that your health is restored, the germ isn't bothering you as much, and that your immune system can keep it under control, okay? So I want to be clear, when we treat Lyme infection of a year duration or more, our goal is not necessarily germ eradication, but rather it's about creating balance again in the body, okay? All right. All right. Now, in terms of how long do I treat with antibiotics for the Lyme infection, I'm usually going to treat, whether it's herbal or prescription, until one of 2 situations is met. Number one, a person is completely well for at least 2 months, and so completely well for 2 months, okay? The reason I treat for at least being completely well for 2 months is I want to make sure we don't get into an early relapse. The other thing we might do, because sometimes the injury created by Lyme is more of a permanent nature. In other words, sometimes we don't get everything back to normal again. In that kind of a situation, I like to treat till somebody is at a good plateau for at least 4 months. And no matter what adjustments or changes I make in the treatment, it doesn't matter because we can't get the person to move forward. And if a person is at that state for about 4 months, then I will stop the Lyme infection treatment as well, okay? Bartonella, generally, which is a separate bacteria, is going to require about 4 to 6 months of treatment. And probably because you're using the Houtunia and Sida acuta to treat the Bartonella, I find they work only about 40, or not only, they work about 70% of the time, excuse me. But that means they don't work 30% of the time. So if your Bart symptoms aren't getting better after about 2 or 3 months of your Houtunia and Sida acuta, you might want to look at seeing if somebody work on a prescription antibiotic regimen for you on that, okay? All right, so usually on the right Bartonella regimen, even though it's going to take 4 to 6 months to get rid of your symptoms, you want to make sure that those symptoms are improving by around 1 to 2 months. And if they're not, then you need to think of a change in your regimen. That's even if you're on prescription antibiotics too, okay? So what do I recommend for Bartonella? Well, I find that for Bartonella, the herbs that Jessica is talking about here will work effectively about 70% of the time. But my preference is to use prescription regimens, and I'm going to show you where you find that article. Take a look in the chapters of the Treat Lyme book here. We're back here at the Treat Lyme book again. Look under infection treatment plans, and the article that I've written about how do you kill Bartonella is called Kills Bartonella, a Brief Guide. Okay, and in here I described that the best way to get rid of Bartonella is to support your immune system by following the successful treatment recipe. The successful treatment recipe, as many of you know, is my Lyme disease treatment guideline, okay? You need to follow all the key steps of the successful treatment recipe to boost your immune system. If you're going to get rid of Bartonella, you got to have your immune system working well, okay? And things like getting sleep and lowering cytokines that I talk about in the successful treatment recipe collectively work together to boost your immune system. And then my preference in terms of getting rid of Bartonella is to use 2 prescription drug combinations, all right? And I describe those in this article. So take a look at this later if you're looking for those ideas on that, all right? All right, let me go ahead and go back. All right, thank you, Jessica, for that question. Good luck to you. Hello, Jerry. Let's see. Hold on here a minute again. I'm dry tonight. Let's see. I'm hoping you can provide some suggestions. I was on Bactrim and later on azithromycin for Lyme and diflucan for yeast. My doctor changed my treatment to herbal therapy because of bad reactions to antibiotics. He put me on Byron White A-Bart formula for Bartonella and also Trifor. There's a second part of your question here somewhere, I think. Hold on here a minute, Jerry. Jerry, for some reason, your question is not coming through. I see that you tried writing it to me a second time and it ends at the same spot, unfortunately. So it's hard for me to make comments here. The only thing I will say to you is that I generally don't find Byron White formulas helpful. That's my main comment, okay? I would look at other options. If you really want specific help from me, one thing you might want to consider doing is look at one of my one-to-one medical consults. Let me show everyone what that is real quick. I'll do a quick screen share here. All right, so I'm back in the Treat Lyme book. Under this tab called Online Consult, there is the page about my one-to-one medical consult service where I can visit with you online and come up with ideas about your healthcare, okay? I can't prescribe when we do these online visits because my medical board requires that I actually physically examine somebody to prescribe medications to them. But I can give you a lot of good ideas. Take a look here. I even have a form you can fill out to let me know if you have questions. I explain here how it works. And then here's the disclaimer where I say, basically, you should know I don't examine you, so I can't prescribe things, okay? But I can give you a lot of good ideas. So you might want to take a look at this to see if I can give you some specific advice because it doesn't look like your whole question's coming through here tonight. Okay. All right. Let me go back here. And actually, anyone can use that consult. Okay. All right. Let's see here. All right. Let's go back here. Huh, interesting. So it looks like people have been having sound qualities tonight. So rough sound. I'm not sure why that's happening tonight, everyone. So I use a webinar service that actually is built on Google, actually. It's a Google-based webinar service. And usually Google does a pretty good job with this. So I apologize tonight for any problems we're having with the technical side. The other thing is tomorrow, usually the recorded version may turn out better. So if you're having a hard time with garbled sound tonight, probably the recorded version will come through okay. At least I hope it does. Let's see here. Hi, Charlene. Let's see. How do I tell someone to connect to the webinar? So what they need to do is they need to sign up for the webinar, Charlene. So they should go to the to my webinar page at treatlyme.net. Click on that, and then they sign up, and then they'll get the link to join into the webinar. Okay. All right. Hello, Candy. Let's see. How can you tell a Herx from an allergic reaction? Can you have a Herx that lasts only a couple of days? All right, so Herxheimer. So I want to explain what a Herxheimer is so that I can help explain how can you tell the difference, okay? So Herxheimer reactions are caused by the immune system seeing dead Lyme parts and also toxins that get released from the inside of Lyme when it gets killed. And in a Herx reaction, the immune system reacts to these dead parts by making more inflammation cytokines. And if you've been participating in the webinar tonight, you know I already explained what cytokines are. They're inflammatory chemicals made by the immune system in trying to get rid of Lyme. And the immune system makes too many cytokines often, which gives you your Lyme symptoms. So what a Herxheimer will look like is a worsening of the Lyme symptoms that are already there, because those existing Lyme symptoms are cytokine symptoms. And in killing germs, you trigger a cytokine flare. So it should be a worsening of energy, a worsening of body pain, a worsening of thinking difficulties, or any other Lyme symptoms that you've had. Okay. Now, if your symptoms that get worse are different than that, then they might be side effects, or they could be allergic reaction. Now, allergic reaction usually is going to have rash, skin rash, some itching associated with it, sometimes breathing difficulty created by it, okay? So I'm going to start thinking of allergic reaction if I got somebody with itching, rash, and maybe breathing difficulties, all right? In terms of Herxes, they can last hours. They can sometimes last days. Sometimes they can last weeks. And a Herx usually is going to occur after you start killing germs or you make a change in your antibiotic regimen, all right? 90% of people can go through a Lyme disease treatment and have Herxes. 10% get no Herxes, all right? So I think they're the lucky ones, but sometimes because a Herx gives us an idea the treatment's working, sometimes those people that don't get Herxes are left wondering if the antibiotics are working. And as I already said tonight earlier when I was talking about the statistics about getting better for Lyme, it can take 3 months of treatment, only 30% of people start showing improvements. By 6 months, 60% do, and by 9 months, 90% do. So if you're a person that doesn't Herx, you can be left wondering sometime when that change is going to happen or if the antibiotics are even working, okay? But again, 10% of people don't Herx in their Lyme treatments, all right? All right. Candy, I hope that gives you some useful information. Good luck to you. Oops, let's get rid of that here. Huh. I'm just going to post this. This is from Kelly. I'm from Canada and I'm not having any trouble with audio and video. However, I had to reconnect as audio was scratchy. So those of you that are having audio problems, you might want to try to reconnect again, okay? And see if Kelly's method works for you. All right. Thank you, Kelly, for that. I appreciate that. Let's see. All right. Let's see here. This is from Sherry. I think Sherry's one of the people that's saying she was having a hard time hearing us, but hopefully she can hear the recording tomorrow. So Sherry, regarding Morgellons connection and Lyme, so Morgellons, everyone, is a skin condition where you have a lot of scratching and itching and filaments, black filaments, blue-colored filaments that come out of the lesion. It's not entirely clear why those filaments are there or what they are. Generally, we think that this is a condition related to immune suppression that can come about because of immune suppression. Approximately 90% or so of people that have Morgellons have Lyme. And if you treat the Lyme, you effectively treat the Morgellons, okay? By getting the immune system working better, by getting Lyme knocked down, by getting rid of immune suppression, people start to do better. It is also possible to get Morgellons if you have HIV, which is another condition that causes immune suppression, okay? So those are just some thoughts. So the things that I like to do when a person has Morgellons is I like to use Biaxin. I find that to be effective as to treat the Lyme, but it seems to help with Morgellons. I also like using sulfa antibiotics like Bactrim or Septra in Canada, Bactrim here in the States. They're the same antibiotic. They just go by two different names depending on the country. All right. So those are some thoughts to think about there. All right. Thanks, Sherry. Hello, Sarah. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Recently diagnosed through IGeneX. Positive IgM bands 31, 34, 41, 66, and indeterminate 39 and 83, 93. Negative IgG, only a few positive. Doc says I have Lyme and have had it for a while based on my testing. Would you agree? Something else. I don't know what the second part. Oh, yeah, I see. So you wrote to me later. You said, would anything else cause that positive result? Thanks for all you do. All right. So everyone, a Western blot is a technique we use to see if your immune system has created antibodies that attach to proteins found on the covering of the germ. Okay. And what antibodies are, they're proteins made by your immune system that attach to a germ, but they don't attach to the whole germ. They don't hold on to the whole germ. Okay. They attach to parts of the germ. And what they attach to are proteins. And so when we're doing a Western blot, we're trying to see which proteins do they attach to. Now, these bands that you have, 31, 34, 41, 66, and even the 39, 83, 93 you're reporting, those are the proteins. And we identify we test to see if you have antibodies against 12 proteins, if this has been done through IGeneX. And we identify the proteins by what they weigh. So there is a protein that weighs 31 kilodaltons. Okay, that's band 31. But that KDA that you'll see on your report, 31 KDA protein, that's kilodalton. That's a microscopic unit of weight. All right. A test is technically positive if you have antibodies against 2 of the following 6 proteins. The 6 proteins are 2325, that's one protein, 31, 34, 39, 41, and 8393, okay? So on your IgM Western blot, you had antibodies against 3 of the 6 important proteins. That indeterminate at 39 and at 8393 is either dirt that is showing up on your test strip, or it's a very weak antibody reaction that's barely being detected. Given what the rest of your pattern looks like here, I suspect it's a weak antibody reaction and not dirt. Okay, I think this looks like a very positive test. All right, now in deciding so what else could cause this? Sometimes, rarely, like way less than 1% rare, this pattern could be caused by having chronic Epstein-Barr virus infections or human herpes virus type 6 infections or cytomegalovirus infections. Way less than 1%, okay? So what happens in those viruses is sometimes the immune reaction against them, the antibodies we make against those viruses, can cross-attach to the Lyme proteins. But it's extremely rare that it would happen against the 6 important proteins that I listed out earlier. Okay, so it would be way less than a 1% chance. So do I think anything else besides Lyme could cause this? No, in your situation, I don't think so. All right. Now, there's another comment I want to make here. So you were tested to see if you have antibodies from 2 families. There's a family called IgM antibodies, and there's a second family here called IgG antibodies. All right. Now, IgM antibodies in all infections are what we make when we first get sick. And by 6 weeks to 3 months, in most infections, they go away and they get replaced by IgG antibodies. All right, so if you've had Lyme for a while, you shouldn't be making IgM antibodies. In fact, but here's what we see. About 80% of the time that somebody has Lyme of a year duration or more, they still make the IgMs. All right, and this tricks a lot of people. They want to call this a false positive test, but it's not a false positive test. It just happens to be what happens in Lyme. So if you were to be sick for a year or more and possibly have had Lyme for a year or more and take this result to an infectious disease doctor that's a member of the Infectious Disease Society of America, they would automatically call it a false positive test because they think that IgMs always go away after 6 weeks to 3 months, okay? But that doesn't happen 80% of the time in Lyme. And we think there's a reason for it. There's a theory as to why it happens. But irregardless of if this theory is right or wrong, it doesn't matter. It happens 80% of the time. It is not a false positive test, all right? So one of the things we know that happens in Lyme that is part of the explanation for this is there's a phenomenon that happens called epitope switching, also goes by another name called antigenic variation. And what happens specifically is these proteins that make up the covering of any germ are basically proteins buried in a layer of fat. A germ covering is proteins buried in fat, all right? And each of these proteins looks different. So the protein 31 looks different than the protein 34. There's multiple copies of every one of those proteins too. And in epitope switching, what happens is those proteins can bury themselves in the fat and pop back out. They can move around basically, okay? And they pop in and out at random. So what the germ looks like is always changing, all right? So we know epitope switching, antigenic variation actually happens in Lyme. That we know, all right? What we theorize then is that the immune system gets tricked into thinking it's seeing a new infection and keeps making the new infection antibodies, all right? So regarding the antibodies, when you get IgMs, again, that can mean acute infection. Once you make IgG antibodies, once you flip over to making IgG antibodies don't go away. They serve as the memory of the immune system, okay? So if you do IgG testing and it comes back positive, I can't tell by looking at a positive IgG test if the germ is still in you or out of you. The only thing I can say about an IgG test is that it gives me evidence that you've had a Lyme infection. On the other hand, when you get an IgM test that's positive, it either means an acute infection, which is the germ is still in you, or it means you've got a chronic Lyme infection where the germ is living in you, flipping its proteins around, all right? So, and a positive IgM means a living germ is in you, okay? So that's the distinction between an IgM and an IgG as well, too, okay? So it's not a false positive test, and it means a living infection, all right? And that's what happens 80% of the time that somebody has chronic Lyme, all right? So do I think anything else could be triggering this? Well, there's an extremely rare chance this could be due to viruses, but I don't think so, all right? The other thing I would point out to you too is if you have a lot of symptoms of Lyme, that actually really makes the chances that this is virus causing this next to zero, okay? All right, so the chances of a test being correctly positive, any test, goes up with the number of symptoms and signs you have of the illness, okay? So if you have a lot of symptoms of Lyme, you've got this test, the odds of it being false is extremely, extremely rare, all right? All right, thanks for that question, Sarah. And good luck to you too. All right. Hello, Anne-Marie. Let's see. Are you familiar with the use of MSM for Lyme? You know, I am familiar with it. I don't find it to be that helpful, actually. So I guess that's about the only comment I can say on that. Okay. All right. Well, MSM, the way I might use it is it helps create good sulfur bonds. And so it's good for rebuilding cartilage sometimes in people that have joint problems. MSM can sometimes also help with depression. Those might be the only two reasons I use it. But in terms of actually being useful at treating or killing Lyme, I don't find it to be that useful. All right. Thanks, Anna-Marie, for that question. Or Anne-Marie for that question, excuse me. Bear with me here, everyone. I'm just kind of cleaning up some of the questions already answered. Hello, Gretchen. Let's see. My biggest symptom is diurnal anxiety. I am anxious from 8 a.m. to about 5 p.m. Then besides feeling tired from fighting the anxiety all day, I am fine. What is the treatment for diurnal anxiety? Wow. I have a couple thoughts, and I would need to probably ask you a lot more questions to come up with more thoughts, okay? Because I often have many thoughts, good and bad in terms of whether they're helpful or not, too, okay? But so when I see things that have a regular pattern, one type of treatment that I'm usually going to consider, regardless of what the problem is I'm going to think of having you see a Chinese medicine practitioner to get acupuncture. All right. Now you're probably thinking, why on earth would I do that? Well, Chinese medicine and Japanese acupuncture looks at the idea that there is an energy flow pattern in the body, and that energy moves in the body in certain patterns. And there is a cycle to that movement. So, for instance, at a certain time of day, energy will flow through the heart at a bigger rate than it will other parts of the body. And then there's another time of the day where the flow through the liver is at maximum, okay? And so somebody that's trained in Chinese medicine can look at these patterns of symptom worsening, and they can do needling or use Chinese herbs to rebalance your energy to deal with this kind of a cyclic pattern. All right. So that's one thing I would think about. When I got people that I get that have cyclic patterns of recurrence, this is one of those situations where I'm going to get Chinese medicine or Japanese style acupuncture involved. Okay. And if you happen to be here, I'd have you go see my good colleague, Randy Clare, who's one of the best Japanese style acupuncturists that I know of. All right. And he would be able to have this taken care of for you in a number of visits. Okay. So anyhow, just Randy Clare, you can find him online. Japanese style acupuncture does great work with my patients, especially when I see patterns like this. Okay. All right. The other thought I have is anxiety going up later in the day. Randy's last name, by the way, is Clere. And I may get asked later, so I thought I would let you know about that. All right. But the other thing in terms of things that could be happening here is a variation in your adrenal function. And if your adrenals happen to be kicking on too high at nighttime, triggering excess cortisol, that could be giving you some of these anxiety symptoms. All right. And although I did describe earlier that I'm not a big proponent and believer in saliva testing of adrenals, there are certain situations where I might look at the saliva testing just to see if I can get an idea. So this is one of those situations you might want to see if you can get a 24-hour saliva test where throughout the day you do saliva samples at different times to see if you can get an idea whether you might be spiking up with your cortisol levels later in the day. Okay? Those are just a couple thoughts that I have for you. Okay? All right. Good luck to you. All right. Hello, Eileen. Let's see. Gram-negative bacteria. Is this to be considered after antibiotic Lyme treatment of 1 year? Eileen, I need to know more. I need more context to put this in because I'm not sure where the gram-negative bacteria is. Is it in your urine? Where is it exactly? So, and I need more information. So I guess I can't answer that question. I'm not sure how to answer it. But thank you for posting it here. All right. Hello, Rosie. Let's see. What do you treat Babesia with during pregnancy? What trimesters do you treat? Is Mepron safe? Boy, generally I don't treat Babesia during pregnancy. Now, I know there are some of my colleagues that will use Mepron, but I'm going to usually wait until outside pregnancy. And also, I am of the opinion that Babesia is not transmitted during pregnancy too, okay? So for those reasons, I tend not to, and I'm concerned with drug toxicity. I do know there are a number of my colleagues that will, and I'm not clear on when they would wind up doing it. So I have a philosophy difference with some of my colleagues, okay? All right. Thank you for that question, Rosie. Hi, Sherry. Again, so do you have a source for a Lyme doctor near Quebec? No, I don't. The problem in Canada is that the doctors that have treated Lyme in Canada have lost their license. And Ontario and Quebec are not good places. They're in British Columbia, and is one place that you can get good Lyme care these days because the naturopaths stepped in and decided to start treating Lyme. So you might consider getting your care through a naturopathic doctor out in British Columbia. There are many doctors here in the States that will see Canadian patients. I do. I have some people that come from Quebec, and I have people that come to see me from across Canada. And it just so happens that I work with a pharmacy in Vancouver that I can send prescriptions to that has a physician that will rewrite them and send them out to you wherever you are. Okay. So unfortunately, I don't have a name for you though. Okay. All right. Good luck, Sherry. Let's see here. All right, let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. What is your impressions of muscle resistance testing? Actually, we get that posted. Hi, CJ. Hi, Dr. Ross. What is your impression of muscle resistance testing? Okay. So muscle resistance testing can be, I think you're referring to as a form of kinesiology, as a way of seeing if an agent is going to be effective or if a person has a diagnosis. So I think kinesiology in various forms. There's another form of kinesiology called autonomic response testing, ART testing. There's a colleague of mine here in the Seattle area, Dietrich Klinghardt, who uses that to mainly formulate his treatments and has trained a number of people in that technique. I think that kinesiology is only as good as the person doing it, okay? So for instance, Dietrich, I think, does a great job using kinesiology, ART testing, to diagnose as well as to plan his treatments. On the other hand, a number of people he's trained, I just don't find good results coming out of their practices. That can be the same with kinesiology too. So out here, I tend to know who the good people are. Across the country, I don't. So those would be my comments, CJ. It depends on the practitioner, all right? So yes, I think energetically our bodies have a way of knowing what's going to work right, and kinesiology is a way of checking in on that, okay? All right. Thank you for that question. Hello, Bev. My thoughts on cannabis oil. Hold on here just a minute. All right. Hi, Bev. Let's see. What are your thoughts on cannabis oil? Well, okay, everyone. Cannabis oil, also known as CBD oil or cannabinoid oil, comes from the marijuana plant. All right. So it's a form of medicinal marijuana. So let's talk about the marijuana plant and why CBD versus other kinds of marijuana. All right. So you got your plant, and you got the green parts, you got stems and leaves. Okay. CBD is extracted from the stems and leaves. The bud of the plant, the blooming part of the plant, is where you get recreational marijuana, okay, which is rich in a chemical called THC, with some CBD in it too. And that THC is what gives you the high, but it also, has some medicinal benefits as well too. I prefer that my patients use CBD because they don't get the high. You don't have to worry about the high part of it, okay? Now, CBD, marijuana in general does not have a lot of research because in this country, our FDA and the DEA and Congress has banned research on it, all right? Unfortunately. But the reality of what we see from Europe and some of the studies there is that there might be benefit, but we don't have a lot of studies, okay? So there's been some more recent looking at CBD and Lyme, and the person in North America has done some limited research on this is a physician named Ernie Murakami. That's Murakami, Ernie, who lost his license for treating Lyme disease in British Columbia, Canada, but has become one of the best advocates for Lyme in Canada. and has taken it upon himself to train a lot of the naturopathic doctors in Canada as well too to treat Lyme. So the people of British Columbia, even though they can't get medical doctors to treat them, they now have a good cadre of naturopathic doctors that are doing a great job. And Ernie has been quite helpful in helping to do that. But Ernie has done some work over the last year looking at a CBD, and based on Petri dish experiments, has some evidence that CBD can kill Lyme and even remove biofilms, okay? Now, in my practice, in terms of what I see, and I happen to be in a state where we can prescribe, or not prescribe, or medical doctors can't prescribe marijuana, okay? The Food and Drug Administration here in the state still will not let us prescribe, even though I am in a state where medicinal marijuana is legal. But in the state, I can recommend that a person, or I can write a letter for a person to say that they have a condition for which medicinal marijuana is helpful. And if they have large quantities, they won't be arrested for that. And they can get, they are tax exempt for being taxed for it here in the state of Washington. We also have a recreational marijuana law here too. But what CBD does is CBD can help you with a lot of the symptoms of Lyme. So it can help with fatigue. It can help your body pains. It can do a lot of work that way, all right? The one thing I haven't found it helpful for, in fact, that it may make worse is your thinking. CBD sometimes can make thinking worse. CBD may have the ability to kill Lyme, but I haven't found it universally effective for that. So even though the Petri dish experiments of Dr. Murakami may say it can help, the reality is I don't find much benefit in terms of a killing agent, okay? But I will add it to treatment when I have people having a hard time with sleep. I will add it for pain control. I might have it if they've lost appetite. I might add it if they need help with fatigue. It can sometimes help with that. I might add it if they're having a hard time with nausea and nothing else is working, okay? So there's some situations that I might. But again, take a look. Google Ernie Murakami on Lyme and our CBD. You'll find some of his writings on the topic too. Okay, all right. Thanks for the question, Bev. Hello, Kathy. Let's see. Hi, doctor. How do symptoms of Lyme and Babesia manifest themselves in children? How are treatments modified for children? Is Lyme contagious like cold through the household activities, sharing cups, using same taps, etc.? All right. So first of all, about Lyme being contagious. It is my opinion, and I think it's supported by science too, and I think the opinion of most Lyme doctors, that Lyme is not contagious. It's not spread through the air. It's not spread by kissing. It's not spread by holding hands. It's not spread by sharing forks and knives, okay? There is some extremely limited evidence that it might be sexually transmitted, but even that science is not the greatest. I just want to let you know about that. And in terms of sexual transmission, I think it is only sexually transmitted maybe about 10 or 15% of the time. And that's just based on what I see in my practice with both couples in a relationship having it. I think the majority of the time it is not sexually transmitted, okay? So that's about the transmission. Lyme can also be transmitted during pregnancy, about 50% transmission rate, and we do have some scientific-based evidence about that. But if you're on antibiotics during pregnancy, that transmission rate goes to 0%. All right, so if you're taking antibiotics during pregnancy, you're not going to transmit to a baby. All right. In terms of Lyme symptoms in children, it's the same symptom list of symptoms for Lyme and Babesia in children, but just some nuanced differences. Children tend to show up more with Lyme having behavioral problems. They don't feel well, so they're not going to behave well, okay? They often will have more psych issues. There tend to be the irritable or the colicky baby. So there tends to be just a little bit of a slant more in the behavioral aspects, okay? Babesia is pretty much going to have the same symptoms you would in adults. I don't find there to be much of a difference when it comes to children. And we're pretty much going to use the same kind of treatments for both Babesia and for Lyme. All right, I'm not going to do much different. I'm going to do dosing reductions, obviously. I'm not going to use adult strength, but generally about the same, okay? All right. Thank you for that question, Kathy. Good luck. Hello, Elizabeth. How important is it for a doctor to have Lyme literate certification? I live in Portland, and there aren't many Lyme literate certified doctors in Portland. So in Portland, the problem is the state of Oregon has decided to remove licenses for doctors that treat Lyme. So you don't have any medical doctors that are treating Lyme in the state of Oregon. About a year ago, I was asked to testify before the Oregon legislature, and it was really quite a harrowing experience. I was invited to testify, and I was literally skewered, even though I was invited. Usually when you get invited by the members of the panel doing the discussions, you figure you're going to be on a little bit more friendly turf, but that is not what happened. They're very hostile, and even in the legislature down in Oregon. And it's a shame because the citizens of Oregon are suffering for not having Lyme doctors. In Oregon, the people that do tend to treat Lyme that have certification would be the naturopathic doctors, and there are a number of naturopaths in the state of Oregon that have some good skills at managing Lyme. Okay, so you might want to look for them. Your Lyme disease support groups probably will have people that will know who those naturopaths are. I'm not going to give out those names over the internet in case they want to have their confidentiality protected. I would go to somebody that knows what they're doing, that has some Lyme literate certification or qualifications. And if that even means Elizabeth traveling up to Seattle to see me or a number of other MDs and NDs up in this area that treat, I think you'd be better served. This is a really complex illness. There are a lot of nuances to managing it, and you're going to do better with your outcome if you have somebody that is more aware of what they're doing with this illness, has some working knowledge of it as well too. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Elizabeth. Hello, CJ. Let's see, Dr. Ross. Given the notorious side effect profile of quinolones, would you use Levaquin by itself for a newly diagnosed but have had for many years Bartonella? Thank you. So in terms of antibiotic regimens to treat Bartonella, many of you know earlier tonight I showed you my article called Kills Bartonella, a brief guide. And CJ, for other alternatives to Levaquin, I would look there, okay? And because there are other alternatives to Levaquin, I start with the other alternatives, all right? Levaquin is a really good drug for getting rid of Bartonella, but it carries some big risk. And those big risks are developing ongoing tendinitis caused by, meaning tendon pain, tendon inflammation caused by being on Levaquin. And the other big one is you can actually rupture your tendons. I used to use Levaquin quite a bit. And I had a couple patients that actually got ruptured tendons on it. And therefore, I use it now more as a last resort, not as a first resort. Now, there's one advantage in Levaquin, and that the treatments using Levaquin tend to be shorter for Bartonella. Usually can be done treating Bartonella with Levaquin after 2 to 3 months, versus the other options that I propose in the Kills Bartonella article are going to take about 4 to 6 months to get rid of Bartonella, okay? But I just shy away from Levaquin these days because of the risk potential. I will use it periodically, but I usually going to save it as a later or last resort, okay? All right, thanks for that question, CJ. Hello, Jerry. Let's see. Hello, Dr. Ross. I'm hoping you can provide some suggestions. I was on Bactrim and later on azithromycin for Lyme and diflucan for yeast. My doctor changed my treatment to herbal therapy because of bad reactions to antibiotics. He put me on, oh, that's right. We read part of this earlier and I couldn't find the second part of your question, Jerry. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to see if you happen to have posted the rest of the question here. Nope, I am just now. All right. All right, there you go. So I don't have a response to your question, as I said earlier. All right. All right. Hello, Wendy. Let's see here. Have you seen correlation between low platelets and Lyme disease? There are a few over the last 12 years and the 1,500 or so patients that I've managed with Lyme disease. I have had 3 that have come into my practice with low platelets. And they had something called idiopathic thrombocytopenia purpura, meaning they had low platelets, and it was thought to be due to immune illness, and they had to be on various immune suppressing agents to get their platelets up. What I found with all 3 is as we treated their Lyme, their platelet counts returned to normal, and we were able to get them off of their chemotherapy agents that they were using to treat their low platelets. Okay, so low platelets usually, in my opinion, is an autoimmune illness where the immune system attacks the body's ability to make platelets, and that is triggered by Lyme. And if you get Lyme under control, you can get that under control as well too. Okay, so that's 3 people out of the 1,500 that I've treated over the last 12 years. Okay, all right, Wendy, thank you for that, and good luck. Hello, Candy. If a patient isn't responding to any treatments, what should they try? So that's complicated. The first place that, Candy, I'd have you take a look at is there's a whole chapter I have in the Treat Lyme book focused on the other treatments you might want to consider if your treatment with Lyme isn't working, all right? And I want to just show you that. I'm going to do a quick screen share, and then I'm going to give you another idea too. All right, so in the chapters in the Treat Lyme book, take a look at the chapter called Can't Get Better, Do This. All right, so in here, I list out all other kinds of things you might want to look at, including various detox treatments, biofilm treatments, chronic virus infection treatments, mitochondria dysfunction, co-infection, autoimmune illness, yeast treatments, and chronic inflammation treatments, okay? I list them up here, and then I provide you all the articles down here to look at these next steps that you might want to try, all right? Now, if you want to get even better help looking at this, one thing you could do, again, is take a look at my online consult. I'd be glad to explore with you the various options that you could take to move your treatment forward, okay? And then one last thing, and this is I keep telling everyone I've got some articles to write, and I do. I've just run out of time here this summer to get some of these things done, but one of the things I need to post is an article about treating what is known as persister Lyme. There is some science that came out about a year ago that is showing that about 20% of Lyme germ, when treated, 20% of the germs convert into something called persister cells. And that it may explain why people's treatment gets blocked. So persister cells are Lyme germs that kind of go into hibernation. And when they're in hibernation, they are not going to respond to antibiotics. They're not technically resistant, but they just stop responding. So they become antibiotic tolerant. And if you stop your antibiotics periodically, or you stop them for a period of time, those germs will go back into a growth phase, okay? So sometimes using pulsed antibiotics can help to treat persister Lyme. There's also being some work done looking at using drugs known to treat persister cells in other illnesses, like in leprosy. There's a drug called dapsone that will treat persister cells. And one of my colleagues, Dr. Horowitz, recently published a study about 100 people in his office where he gave them dapsone as part of his treatment and found that 59% had some degrees of improvement. I have started adding dapsone to my practice based on that study, and it's too early for me to tell yet whether it is helpful or not. So I'm starting to look at that idea as well too. So I hope sometime within the next week or two to get to be able to find the time to write the articles on persister cells, persister state, and the things that we can do to deal with persister cells. But keep your eyes out on the Treat Lyme book. You will see, I promise, probably within the next week or two, maybe this weekend, I'll have time to write those articles that I can give you more information about that. Okay? All right. So thank you for that question, and good luck. All right. All right. Well, that's it for me tonight, everyone. So There's more questions as I just started reading them. I'm like, those are going to be more complicated than we have time to go through right now. So I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Tomorrow morning, as I said earlier, you will get an email from me saying that the recording of tonight's webinar is ready. I apologize for the choppy sound. I understand many of you experienced choppy sound tonight. Usually the recorded version that is fixed out of it. I hope that's the case. When I listen and edit the recording version later tonight, I'll find out if that's true or not. In a second here, I'm going to take you over to the Treat Lyme book, where if you have not had the opportunity yet to subscribe to the book so you can read all that great content, you can. The way you subscribe to the book is start reading on any article. And if it happens to be one of the articles that is not free, you're going to be asked to subscribe. Subscribe. When you do subscribe, I appreciate it greatly because you're supporting these webinars, okay? You're supporting my ability to find time to actually write more of these articles as well, too, okay? So I hope you will subscribe. I also hope when you go to the Treat Lyme book that you will actually look at the navigation menu on top and click on the webinars tab so that you can sign up for next week's webinar, because we will have another one next week, and then I'm probably going to take off for a week or two after that. All right. So I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you for being here tonight. And I hope you'll subscribe to the Treat Lyme book and help support the efforts that we're doing here. Okay. Good night, everyone.